sort of reactions to the Heirophant. Some people had this really like really almost a knee-jerk reaction, which you call a knee-jerk reaction.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of
real
that in what I
resistance to
read.
So the Hiero, I don't understand
Yes.
why.
the Hierophant. I think
Represents, it can represent patriarchy for some people. The same as the emperor.
mhm.
And you'll see some really vast differences in the depictions in the cards based on
Okay.
where the artist is coming from.
I didn't pull, Kurt, I didn't pull a single card this week.
Okay.
I haven't looked. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna lean back on my throne.
I even found the Hierophant for the Gaia, and I put it in there. So
Yay! Thank you.
yeah.
I'm
I'm in love with that deck, Kurt.
It is not even close to the same number as because they're not they're numbered like that deck numbers them differently, but I found it because the image kind of corresponds, and then the reading stuff corresponds to it. So
well, I'm glad, because I would have pulled the wrong card then. I would have texted you and you would have said, I don't have time to look for cards. And I would have pulled the wrong card.
Oh yeah, that's okay. That's from Hanson Roberts.
Yeah. And
yeah,
okay, hang on. It's not quite focused, so shift it back or forward a little, like back. It's just blurry, but okay.
I can see it.
So if you notice, there's a shadow on his nose. Which when I first saw that, and this is my newer deck, I have my older deck that's 20 years old. It's really pronounced. And I thought to myself, well, damn, that looks like a little brown nosing kind of action going on there, right? This idea of, anyway, it's always stuck with me. And I'm like, wow, okay. In order to climb up these structures, what you must have to do in order to, that's one interpretation, right? Some of the
tarot artists, and Mary Hanson Roberts may be among them, I don't know, but they kind of put the Hierophant as he's kind of a televangelist almost, like he's kind of he's kind of shady, but a lot of that, and like Robin Wood, for example, fully admits that that's her distrust of the patriarchy. That's her for any kind of patriarchal tradition. She just wants nothing to do with it,
You look at this Heirophant. This is from Light Seers. It was all about
I love that.
Okay, what's it called? The Light Seers?
The Light Seers Tarot. That's a great deck. I really like it.
It's a very popular deck. Yeah, it's on my like to get list eventually. That is
Light Seers.
Yes, the Light Seers. Okay. That is a beautiful.
It's a beautiful interpretation of the Heirophant.
Right? So Denise, just play with me a minute. Can you move it closer and let's see what happens? No, does it focus on it? Yeah, there it goes.
I can see it clearly. Yeah.
Right there. That's a good place to put your cards.
Okay.
One of Rachel Pollack's definitions of the term Hierophant is one who can inspire others to see visions.
Yes, I liked that part.
So from that definition, you see in several decks, including, I would say that one, you see the Hierophant as shaman.
Or, yogic practitioner, Buddhist practitioner, anyone who's with that sort of
the joyfulness there.
Yes, the happy, the potential.
And then that mandala emanating from the light source. I mean, that's just amazing.
Well, and I think, Jenny, you have a point that's basically, seeing the Hierophant as guru, that you use the Hierophant or the guru as a path, as an entrance onto the path. or a guide onto the path. And I'm really surprised to not see that guru image or that guru idea more often, actually, as the Hierophant. You don't even, like, for example, like Osho has an extra card that's the guru card. There's a 79th card that's the guru card. But the Hierophant is not pictured as the guru in that.
It's one of those cards that I'm finding I had for a long time, I think a real challenge, maybe even still, sort of connecting or identifying with this aspect. It could very well be because I'm sort of resisting. When I was all of 15, I sort of declared that I was leaving the church, all this kind of stuff. And it could very well have resonate with that deliberate action of mine, right? And so I've never returned to, and I was raised Catholic, I never returned to the church in a traditional understanding of the church. My favorite time to go to church is when nobody's there.
So like daily mass, like when there's just like the ladies in their sweatpants.
Well, and not even then. I mean, to me, it's really about going in and using it as and it depends, not all the churches feel this way, finding that church that feels a particular way. So St. Bridget's Church that's over here, not too far from me. It's between Bandera Road and Babcock Road. It's sort of in one of these sort of neighborhoods interior. I absolutely love that church to go in during the day when nobody is there and just sit and meditate.
Well, it's dedicated to a Celtic goddess, so
I know. Well, no, and yeah. I know. Everywhere it's apparent, right? And it's apparent everywhere. There are such beautiful, the folks who designed it, whoever, the architects and that group of people who designed that church were very much aware of, of Brede's, bolstering, backing up, this sort of telescoping one into the other. And you see that everywhere. What do they call is it the font, the baptismal font?
Yes. Yes.
It's a cauldron.
Oh, that's cool. That's really
I love it.
Yeah. There's a chapel off to the side that is dedicated to Our Lady of Guadalupe. There's so many Catholic churches that will have a chapel that's dedicated to her. But it's certain churches where I'll go and I sure I'll attend a mass every now and then. And it depends on when it is though. And it's wonderful to feel that kind of energy of the people who are there, right? But typically when I step back into a Catholic church, it's almost when nobody is around, right? Or other folks who are going in and lighting candles and meditating and praying. So that's usually when I tend to step foot. So my return, if you will, is very non-traditional, right? It's very much, and it's still a kind of, in opposition probably to this particular figure. Although I think that this finding really, kind of like, why am I having such resistance to this now, right? I can imagine, I can understand at 15 and 20 and 30 and what have you, but now.
Well, you do.
So may I, sorry, go ahead.
You work in a patriarchal system, a top-down system.
Yeah, I mean but I've encountered many, if we're going to talk about, it's a patriarchal system, and I've certainly encountered folks who, in order to survive, I suppose, take on very sort of patriarchal communication styles and things of this nature, who identify or sort of cisgender, right? Cisgender female. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's this, that way of approaching things will seep into people's practices. It's possible that that's exactly what I'm resisting to. Those gals on Easy Tarot were talking a little bit about and something you mentioned earlier already, Kurt, is sometimes the way people respond to the Hierophant is the same sort of response to the Emperor, right? For those same kinds of reasons. And so I admit I had both of those responses there. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to examine that a little bit more and do what I think is really very, very helpful, is to look at these cards in their totality, right? What is the sort of expanse or the broadest understanding of all of them? Right. So especially when you're going to read cards for others too. I mean, for self and others, you have to help, when somebody draws and having read cards for others, and you draw the death card, right? And depending on your deck, I mean, death is like, whoa, what is this? So you have to go through this long explanation about death doesn't really mean death usually, or depends on the other cards and all this kind of thing. I mean, you have to have a way of understanding death in its broadest sense and what that means, that transition. And I really like what Paula writes about the death card, right? That it's a possibility for transition, but you're not going to transition anything unless all of those pieces are in place first, right? That you've put those pieces in place. You've done you've done the work you needed to do in order for transformation to take place. So, so anyhow, I mean, the same thing with I think the Heirophant. It's funny because there are certain cards that when I encounter them, they give me I have a little bit of a struggle with them. And I love that, because I love that mirror that reflects back to me. It's like, oh, this is where you need to do a little more work, probably, right? To come to terms, make peace, understand it in a broader way. So yeah, so that was true for the Emperor as well. And so I really appreciate our discussion last week, because that helped me to see it much more broadly. This sort of kind, benign, leader, so has that potential anyway.
Yeah, I like the service leader.
Yeah, the service leader.
Yeah, yeah. You get more of like a Christ as opposed to like some kind of, distant figure, or brooding figure.
Right.
But in looking at, several cards and reading interpretations and so forth, I'm seeing like three major sort of strains or strands of interpretation, or of the Hierophant. One being the Christian, which is the more traditional, the mystical Christian. The other being Jewish, actually, and then the third being pagan. And they're very, very different. And then when you get into the pagan, there's a couple of different ways that that's. I mean, there's a general sort of thrust with that, if you will. That's even that word is patriarchal. But anyway, but the ways in which sort of it's deconstructed, right? The patriarch is patriarchal aspect is deconstructed, or even that role of the Hierophant is reclaimed.
Yeah.
And it's and actually how the tarot artist or the tarot author, or the combination thereof, how they approach this particular card actually says a whole lot about their personal philosophy and where they're coming from, probably more so than any card we've seen so far. It's kind of interesting. I didn't expect to encounter that,
That's really interesting. Yeah. And yet I think it's, when you touch upon that, you touch upon so many, I think, wounds, right? And it's sort of like, this is how you sort of protect against that wound, as you push off really strong and really hard, is one way to kind of protect against that, and to be critical in a way that is not allowing you to sort of see the fuller picture, the bigger picture, which we've all been there, right? We definitely have all been there, where it requires a little bit of distance from that wound, or some healing, if you will, to use some different language, to then to be able to go in and say, okay, now I can sort of understand, right? I can understand. So somebody who grew up in sort of an abusive household, and they've worked, let's say, with a counselor or a psychologist to kind of move through and heal some of that stuff. And then there's a point at which, if the counselor or the therapist is worth their salt, where they'll say, so how maybe did you, Brad, how are you contributing to this situation? Which is a hard question for somebody who has been victimized to be able to answer, right? To be able to sit back and turn that lens on self and to say, how am I continuing to contribute to and making this, reinforcing this over and over again, and how am I contributing to my own wound or my own pain, that kind of thing. Well, so I mean, yeah.
And the religious traditions that we're exposed to when we're young, whether they're harmful, whether they're positive, whatever they are, that sticks with us. If you're exposed to something at 4 or 5 or 2, those preconceived notions, etc., run very, very deep. And we think that we've exercised all of that and all that, but it pops up in
our bodies are liturgical rites, that have just sort of were a repository for that, right? Especially if you grew up in any kind of sort of dedicated religious household, right? And so I have friends whose parents weren't necessarily very religious one way or the other, right? And so, but mine were, so there was not a whole lot of room for stepping aside. So as a 15-year-old and especially a 15-year-old as a female in my particular family, the boys had fallen out of that tradition for a little while, but the women were going to continue it on, right? I mean, we were all going to continue that. And so to step out at 15 and say, hey, wait a second. And I mean, that caused a tremendous amount of lots of, teenage rebellion and angst and arguments and fights and, just all of that based on that. But despite all that, it's still there. I mean, it's still there. You put me in a mass and I'll be able to pick up right where I've left off. I mean, just sort of that physical sort of, right? I know exactly when to say them. It doesn't matter how long it's been since I've been to mass. I'm like, whoa, what happened? Autopilot, something, what's going on, right?
My grandmother took me to all sorts of faith healers, all that stuff. I mean, they actually owned. I cannot, because I was so young at the time. I can account for like between $3,000 and $5,000 that my grandparents gave to Jim and Tammy Baker, and I was like 10, so I'm sure it was much more money than that. But I can account for at least that much. And I've been to Jim and Tammy. Was at Jim and Tammy Baker's resort twice. And I will tell you that you could not say a negative thing about Jim Baker the whole time my grandmother was alive. Like still, I mean, decades after that, and he's back on TV doing the same thing today.
Wow.
Saying that, like in selling like all this, this bunk stuff that's supposed to cure COVID and AIDS and all this kind of stuff. And people, oh yeah. Yep.
Well, when you say this, it's interesting because there's a tarot deck that I have. Well, we talked about the Herb Crafters deck. I think it was last week. We mentioned that maybe last week or the week before. I think it was the week before. We were talking about the Empress. And my grandmother was a curandera, and so I grew up in a folk Catholic household, and because of that, there was this really interesting mix of just everyday sort of mysticism that was very much just, you just didn't question, you just sort of undid this. But so this idea of going to a faith healer in a way is not a foreign idea to me, just in the form of the PTL, that's a kind of foreign concept to me. But to go into some little dark house, a hovel of a house, and working with somebody who's more shamanistic, I think is not. But it's a very different kind of thing. Although You
the
would get,
problem comes in when they tell you, oh, you just don't believe hard enough.
no, that's it. Well,
And that's my issue with all the new age crap too.
What does PTL mean, guys?
Praise the Lord.
praise the
Oh.
Lord.
It was this whole
Was it
network.
past the loot or something?
Well,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
it's like,
it's a fascinating story, especially since Tammy Faye became a hardcore gay icon afterwards. You know, you should watch the documentary Eyes of Tammy Faye if you
I'm
have.
gonna have to.
It's fabulous. Now she died very much in pain and not, you know, it was not, you know, but her son actually parted ways with Jim because he believes he's a pastor also, but he believes in gay marriage.
Mm,
He
mhm.
parted ways with Jim, and it was a big to do. Um, you know, but anyway, um, yeah, I question this whole thing about, you know, we create our entire reality. Yes, our thoughts matter, and yes, you know, but there's more factors involved than just that. You
There's a
know,
bigger picture.
there's a very vast and multivalent picture going on. You know, for example, if somebody has cancer, I'm not going to say, well, you gave yourself this cancer. You know, there is no way that I'm going to do that, even though Louise Hay would come right up and like say that to somebody. I'm not going to say that to somebody, you know. Now, there are ways to approach, you know, okay, you have this situation in your life, you know, you can try to approach it a certain, you know, you can try to make the best of it in one way or another, or you can like give up. You know, there are different approaches to that. It's like when you get on a plane, you get on a plane and the plane takes off, and you know, you realize once you're in the air that the plane is not going to land, that eventually, that somehow, you know, either the you know, the engine's been blown out, or the plane's going to crash and everybody's going to die, and it's only a matter of time before everybody dies. What you do in that interim, you know, matters. You can put yourself in a, you know, you can make peace with the divine. You can do whatever. You can like find somebody to be in the Mile High Club with at the last minute, whatever you know, whatever you whatever you choose to do. But you have agency over what happens to you in that plane before, you know, the plane crashes and everybody dies, right? So I believe in that. I believe in that kind of agency, but you know, I just there are more factors involved. It's not as simple as some would make is. To me, that's just a different version of the rigid Hierophant religion. It's just a different version of it.
There's so again in the curandera tradition, there is that idea that faith is ultimately what will heal you. Your faith in God is what's going to heal you, right? So there is that degree. These are mostly people too, at least the people that I was working with as I was growing up, and my family worked with, where they would do things on donation, you know. So
Right.
they weren't pricing out their work, and you know, well, that's $100 or whatever. They wouldn't do that. It was all on donation. They would take food, right? You know, I mean, it was that kind of it was from that place in their heart. And then there was also the kind of basic belief here that all illness starts in essentially the emotional body, right? That there's an emotional, spiritual kind of almost like a trigger somewhere. Now, I don't know, you know, to the degree to which I believe all that completely, but I do think that the degree to which our emotions and the impact they can have on our bodies is something that we do know, right? We've studied
Yeah.
this specifically. We know, I mean, all you have to do is look at how stress impacts your body, right? Because it's your emotional perception of a particular event or whatever, and then how you're reacting to that emotionally then kicks off. If your nervous system is already a little bit um, high gear, right? And you're kind of a little more high strung, right? So for example, my father had generalized anxiety disorder, and he took Librium, right, for that. Like back in the 70s and the 60s,
I can't even imagine back in the 70s or 60s taking.
Yeah, they, you know, so he took Librium for years. And so consequently, we all are predisposed to developing generalized anxiety disorder or some form of anxiety, right? So I'm a little more high strung than I would like to be. So it's not situational, right? So my
Deal with it
anxiety,
very, 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 very well.
yes,
Yeah, I mean, I am very familiar with generalized anxiety disorder.
you get it then.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's rough stuff, but I do know that there was a point before I had it to the degree that I have it now that it didn't seem to impact me as much, right? It seemed to be much more situational, right? So it's public speaking related or something like that. But the point here is that the point I think is that to the degree to which we can make ourselves sick is, I think, probably pretty well documented just by our thought patterns, right? This, can I give myself a stomach ache by
True.
worrying?
But again, the shadow side of that, to use the term that we've used before, right, is this idea that a lot of people in a lot of communities have got a lot of communities and some serious issues, especially now with, we can just pray away the COVID, right? We can just, exactly, we can just, God is not going to give us the COVID, right? We are believers. We are, and
And I ask those same people, then why do you need a gun?
Right.
But it's that same, and it ultimately gets into prosperity gospel, which is some horrible, narcissistic, evil shit. And which is, ultimately says, well, if God loved you, if you have faith and stuff, then you would have a mansion, you would have this, you would have that.
No, that's
it's all that same shit. It's all the same shit. That's why I can't buy into this. We absolutely create our own reality and all that. I cannot buy into that because it's the prosperity gospel. It is hardcore conservative Republican bullshit. That is what that's.
And yet I agree. Yet I do think that when we're not in a shadow sense necessarily, that there are ways in which our emotional body can.
Yes, true.
So there are ways our emotional body can do what?
Impact our physical body. And that,
yes, absolutely. Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
But you are right. I mean, I think it's probably this knowledge that we can do that then gets, it gets manipulated.
So let's change the but to and. You are right, because we can have all of these at the same time, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's so interesting because I'm pulling my two different Heirophants, right? These two different.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And we should get to your gallery actually.
Yeah.
That way we can see some more interpretations.
Do we want to throw out a few words? I'm going to be honest. This was my least prepared for class. Do we want to throw out a few to help me in my notes about the Heirophant and the meanings or something? Or is that coming?
That's coming.
We start looking at it. We'll start looking at stuff.
My screen share. I didn't just screen share, did I? Hold on. I think if I share this, hold on.
Jasper?
Can you see the? Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I did is, in doing this, is I just went from traditional to less traditional.
Okay, so can you talk about those 3 crosses on his staff? Because I started to read something about it and I got distracted, a phone call or something. And can you talk to that?
So I'm not going to be as eloquent as Pollock, but basically the three crosses on his staff represent the 3 levels of initiation, essentially. And in the first one,
your stripes.
The first one represents dogma, right? Essentially represents like intellectual knowledge, which is what the Hierophant represents. The Hierophant in the traditional context, the Hierophant represents the religion, the dogma of the religion. And his crown, the three levels here are Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in
Right.
this version. And he's, you know, and he's got some of the same elements as the emperor, like he's got the red cloak, etc. And so, but he's also got sycophants, right? He's got like people like kowtowing to him, you know. So that kind of gets into the shady side of the Hierophant, or what, you know, or what's seen sometimes is the negative aspect of the Hierophant, that, you know, he can have, you know, he represents this prescribed authority, right? The dogma that he is ascribing prescribes him this authority, right? Incidentally, and I thought this was interesting, Pollock said that the reason why he's called the Hierophant and not the Pope is because the Golden Dawn wanted to move away from Catholicism, and the Hierophant was the person who presided over the Eleusinian mysteries, which I thought was really cool. And the word Hierophant means the bringer of light, or one who sees. But interestingly, in this depiction, he's got the two pillars like the high priestess has. He's got the water and the land and essentially the valley, the beauty, etc. are beyond him. So he is also an entrance point, right, into that reality. It's just coming from a different realm. You know, it's coming from a different entrance way, right? So in the Kabbalah, and I'll get my notes here on this, he is between wisdom and mercy. And here's where I'm going to differentiate between Jewish versus Christian. The Christian mystical interpretation of the Hebrew letter Vav, or Va, V-A-U, Vo, I guess it's Vo. Vo is nail, and the idea is that the Hierophant basically nails, if you will, or affixes the wisdom of the male divine to mercy. So the Hierophant acts as a giver of mercy, because the Hierophant is giving that wisdom by way of his dogma, right? But the Jewish interpretation of that Hebrew letter is actually a little different and kind of interesting. So the Jewish interpretation that I read, vow, means confession, which is interesting because, like even for example, if you look at the soul retrieval, the Egyptian soul retrieval ritual, or you look at, like, you know, any of that, there's this aspect of giving up, or naming, or giving out, releasing that which holds one down, right? So that aspect of confession, that aspect of letting go, in order to be initiated into the rites. Also, that connotation in Judaism, particularly in diaspora Judaism, like it's associated with Yom Kippur, which is the once a year. I believe it's at the autumn equinox. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think it's at the autumn equinox. But anyway, basically it's when the community, the collective community of Jewish folks all over the world, it's when they essentially confess to Yahweh that they fucked up as a community. And I didn't know this until I think it was in Pollock, where she talks about anyone named Cohen as an ancestral priest, and they make the special hand signs, the traditional hand signs, where everybody else averts their eyes. This is not in the Pollock book, but this is a famous story that if you're a sci-fi nerd, you probably know. When Leonard Nimoy was growing up, he was told to avert his eyes, but he didn't, and he saw, and that's where the uh, that's where the Vulcan hand yeah, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. I believe that's the Hebrew letter Shin, I believe.
Can't really do it on the other one. I hit the
Yeah,
struggle.
yeah. But Leonard Nimoy's little boy did not avert his eyes. He saw them doing the hand he saw them doing that. And and so when they were on set of Star Trek, there was nothing written in there. It just said, hands, he gives the Vulcan hand greeting. And so he did that, but that was because as a little boy, he did not avert his eyes, and he looked at that. So anyway, that's
a great story.
Yeah. And later on, of course, Leonard Nimoy, for the last 10, 15 years of his life, was very much into Kabbalah and very much into mystical Judaism. In fact, he did like photography books and really cool stuff that he could do because he was Leonard Nimoy. But the Byzantine tarot, it's on my to get list, but anyway.
Beautiful.
So this deck basically tells the story of the Byzantine Empire. This is Patriarch. This is Theodosius, and he was one. He was one of the at one time before the papacy really was. The papacy in Rome was like really supreme over everything and asserted its power over all of Christendom. There were 5 major patriarchs, one of whom was in the Byzantine Empire was Theodosius. So this is Theodosius, and he's holding the Gospels there. And we'll now. Here's where we get into the nasty interpretation, the nasty version of the Hierophant. This is from Robin Wood. She hates this card, and she full well goes into why she hates it. She hates anything having to do with patriarchal authority. And you can see this may as well be Pope Benedict. I mean, this may as well be Nazi Pope. I mean, yeah, Pope Benedict was extremely problematic. He had some issues on a number of levels. I know some people that absolutely adore Pope Benedict, but
are we seeing that from his facial expression?
Yes.
Or what? Okay.
Yes. Look at his facial expression.
I mean, it's just, yeah.
He's like, "Ooh, I get some altar boys back when I get back in the sacristy."
There's that deal. I saw that. I mean, we've got youthful figures in this one as well.
Yeah, yeah. But I think Hanson Roberts is not as vehement as Robin Wood. And I looked at that before I even started reading her interpretation on it, and I was like, "Ooh."
Like, one of the altar boys is smiling slightly, and the other one is not.
So yeah, one of them does not want to be there. He's probably like, "I want to go home."
Oh, he's like, "I'm not down."
I didn't notice that, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I don't want to be so many altar boys who didn't want to be altar boys. Just because they, I mean, even if not for something more.
My parents are making me do this.
Yeah, just.
Yeah.
I gotta be here.
I actually enjoyed being an altar server, but I was in my 20s, so.
No.
And I loved it too. I did it too.
Experience. Well, that's because you used to be an Egyptian priest or priestess. You were bringing that back because Catholicism is essentially Egypt. I mean, there's so much of it that Okay, so here, speaking of Egypt, this Hierophant is very deliberately. It could be taken as a priest. He could be taken as a priest of Osiris, or he could be taken as Osiris. And he is the counterpart to, in this deck, Isis as the high priestess. And
You said he could be a priest of Osiris?
yeah, he could be either be. I mean, the deck, the author of the deck said, you know, Osiris or Osiris's priest, either way.
And
But
he's compliments to who?
to the high priestess, who is often seen as Isis. And here you've got and he's got the ceremonial flail. He's got the crook and flail, and the flail is there to emphasize the potentiality of the harsh aspect of the Hierophant. That there is a harsh aspect. He's got the four creatures: the bull, the lion, the dove, and and the snake is coiled around his crown. Now the snake being there is also a reference to Isis. It's also a reference to the high priestess. The green cobra, I found out reading for something else, is sacred to Isis, which I didn't know. I didn't know, but yeah, the green cobra is sacred to Isis. Also, the three rings, rather than the crown with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, he has the three rings, which are Oset, Osiris, and Horus, right? Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And he's got bull horns everywhere because the Hierophant corresponds to Taurus. Hierophant corresponds to Taurus. And I can see that in the sense that Taurus, even though Taurus is a feminine sign, Taurus people are all about, you know, understanding how things are put together. They're very much, you know, like they're very much Lego people. Like they want to like put everything together and take it apart and build it again. You know, that's kind of the Taurus mentality, you know. We also in the different geometric stuff here is all about kind of that pinning of the divine with the human, right? And he's between two pillars. He's between two pillars, like the high priestess. This V shape here, it has something to do with it has something to do with protection. Has something to do, and you know, I read it, but I didn't quite.
It's also an inverted star, and you see the same thing in the next one. You see the regular star in both of them and an inverted star.
Right, and of course the inverted pentacle is it's not quote unquote satanic in and of itself. What the inverted pentacle is it means the body taking precedence over the spirit. And you'll see that in some Wiccan traditions like Alexandrian and Gardnerian. That's the second degree initiate. For the second degree initiation, they use the inverted pentacle. I have not seen a deck, but I'm wondering if there's a deck out there that has the Hierophant as the Witch Queen. The Witch Queen being in traditional Wicca, and by traditional I mean like the Gardnerian. A witch queen is somebody that has three covens split off from her coven. That would be an image that would fit with the higher because of that continuing tradition, right? Here we actually have the in the middle card, which is from the Tabula Mundi, we have the Hierophant depicted as a Tibetan monk. So we do have the you know, the Eastern element coming in. He's got some Western too, because he's wearing the Taurus bull horns. He's got you can't really see it well, but he's got a droge, which is a spiritual knife, a Tibetan spirit. It's a Tibetan version of an athame, essentially. The idea is that the spiritual knife cuts negativity away, but it's.
And is that the thing with the two little bell things on the end?
No, he's got a bell in one hand, and he's got in his other hand the.
Yeah, but this thing, right? I guess you can't see my cursor, but it's the yellow thing in his hand, and it's got the two ends that are open, and there's like a ball in each one.
That's what that is. Yeah.
And what's it called?
Droge, I'm probably mispronouncing it. I used to have one. I don't think I have one anymore, but I used to have one.
And it cuts, say that again, it does
It
what?
cuts away negativity. It's a spirit, it's a knife on the spiritual realm. And here you've got the set of keys, and we saw in an earlier version, you know, him with the set of keys, which is which again, you know, he you know, he does have the keys to the path, but it's a very different entrance to the path, say, than the high priestess is, you know. And here we have the 4 creatures. And these have a correspondence with the Great Sphinx. The one that applies to the Hierophant, the maxim that applies to the Hierophant is to keep silent. You know, and that could be in part because he's initiating one into, you know, mysteries, right?
And what are the 4 creatures?
We've got a bull, a lion. I believe that's an eagle, and I don't know what she is.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me.
Actually, we see over here the traditional 4 creatures are a dove, bull, lion, and a snake. Yeah.
Well, so if you go over to the chapel at Incarnate Word, they've got the 4 archangels on each corner. Like, I can't remember if it's right around the steeple, but they're all right there. And that reminded me of that.
That's actually probably very much in line with this. And then, you know, in Christianity, Christian iconography too, you have each of the 4 gospel writers often represented as animals too.
Right. That's why I was wondering. I wanted to know. I didn't want to know what they look like in the drawing, Kurt. I wanted to know what they are. That's what I was asking.
They correspond to like sayings of the Great Sphinx. There's like if I'm remembering correctly, that
and then is that the Eye of Horus on his headdress?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It also represents in specifically it represents the third eye, the opening of the third eye.
Which y'all, I've never experienced that before in a physical feeling until I joined y'all in this group.
Oh, really?
Seriously. Like I might have, but I didn't recognize it until I joined y'all in this group.
Wow. That's going to bring us to some of the more contemporary interpretations of the Hierophant. Some of the more pagan and contemporary interpretations of the Hierophant will speak to that, actually. So here we have the Hierophant as the poet Taliesin. And the idea is that the Hierophant is not communicating religious doctrine. The Hierophant is communicating sacred poetry, sacred words that aren't necessarily religious doctrine, but in and of themselves are potent, that can transport the listener to another state of consciousness. So, for example, like if this were an Indian-based deck, for example, it could be Valmiki, the poet Valmiki, or some of it. But I really like this idea of the Hierophant as bard or poet, and of course, Taliesin is and I didn't know this before I read it, so I'm not, don't be impressed by this, but he is the son of the goddess Caradwyn, because she ate. His father his father stuck his fingers in her cauldron and then tasted the sacred liquid in the cauldron, and then he gained the wisdom that was supposed to go to her other son, her pre-existing son, And because he gained that wisdom, he could shapeshift, and she chased after him, and he kept shapeshifting and all that. And finally, he turned into a seed, and she ate him. And then he was essentially reborn as his son. And Taliesin is the son that was reborn, right? And he's a poet, and so he has this knowledge. It was basically gifted to him through his mother, the goddess, right? And so he can communicate that knowledge through his poetry, through his art. So I like this, right? And I like this version, right? And so there's all this unseen stuff that's like
Right.
hanging out, but he can communicate all that to his, and here, the little kids that are hanging out, they've got his rapt attention. They want to be there, and there's no like sort of malice or anything. He's essentially a storyteller, which I think is cool. I am very partial to that idea.
Yes, it's in great contrast to that that other one.
Now here's one that, here she's a woman, right? Which I thought was interesting, and she's got Isis's wings, she's got the full-on altar, she's got the Taurus horns up here. So I thought this was interesting that they just full-on made the Hierophant a woman here.
And do we know what deck that is, Kurt?
That's the Good Tarot. It's by
Oh, well, that's an oracle deck, no? Or
no, it's not. It's a tarot deck. It's got 78 cards. It follows the tarot numbers.
okay. Well, I have that, and I swear, okay.
It can work like an oracle, but
I'm gonna look that. I think I might have a different thing than we're talking about.
But it is a tarot. It's a tarot that is treated more like an oracle because the creator of it is a person who's done a lot of oracles.
Huh.
Here we've got.
Okay. No, I just looked it up. So that's Colette. What's her name? Colette?
Colette.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. I was just struck with that she just made the Hierophant a woman, which I'm really surprised that more pagan decks don't do that.
Yeah.
Because to me, I really, really like, and we'll get to it, but I really like what Rachel Pollack does with it, because she totally takes the concept of the Hierophant and really deconstructs it and makes it something really nice and cool. But here we have the Hierophant as the high priest. That's sort of the counterpart to the high priestess. And this is from the Druidcraft, and he's making the sign of Krenunos. He's got the bull horns. He's very serious, and he's but he's in connection with the land.
And he looks strong. There's this air of like a confident strength that isn't necessarily overbearing.
Right. It's masculine without being overbearing. Right. Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I like that's kind of cool, this little bird here. He's in line, the sun is overhead.
And what deck is this?
That's the Druidcraft.
Huh.
So it's very much a Celtic influenced, which I'm not an authority on Celtic stuff. Like, I can't pronounce Gaelic. I can't, like.
Well, get with it, Kurt.
Right. I'm learning about, like, the more Wiccan stuff I read, there's a whole lot of Celtic stuff in a lot of Wiccan stuff. So, now this is the what you call it, the Gaia, Dreams of Gaia.
I am in love.
And I like this because
So beautiful.
he's got an owl. You can't go wrong with an owl. But the and the reason why he's the Hierophant and not the and not say the Hermit, for example, is that the card reading, like the keyword for the card is tradition. So
Okay.
he like the poet Taliesin. I mean, you could look him like him as like a Homeric bard almost. You know, like he has that. He could be a storyteller. He could be Gandalf. You know, like somebody that the hero meets on the path to, you know, give them that knowledge. You know. Or another face of Merlin, you know.
That gorgeous wolf next to him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I think we'll see a wolf. I think we'll see a wolf in another card as we move on to.
And even look behind him at that blue disc that has all the swirls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, he's beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's got books. I think those are books of knowledge down to his left, or on my left.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that, but yeah, you're right. I'm gonna.
And then I love his staff. You know, it's got the light, but it's like, it's very kinesthetic. It's moving. It's like you see everything happening and you're invited in, and it's almost like that's the portal.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Or the portal's behind him and he's the way he has the staff there. Like, so, and which I'll take you back at the end to those 3 stripes of initiation, because we didn't finish that conversation, but that he's.
I can't remember what the other 2 stripes are.
I am in love with this deck, y'all.
It's beautiful.
But do you see how it's more advanced, Denise? That the cards don't go in order. They have different names. Like I'm gonna have to get to know that deck above and beyond what I'm learning.
Yeah.
It makes me think of like the wizard Tim from the Holy Grail. You know, he's gonna ask, "What is your favorite color? What is the velocity of them?"
I was looking up at the Herb Crafter's Tarot, which is this sort of combination of Oracle and Tarot, right? So it's definitely not a beginner deck, and I mentioned it before. And I was curious, and my deck is back in my other part of my house. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to get it, but I'll look it up here. And the herb, there's an herbal association with each of the different cards. This one's cacao.
Oh, nice.
So it's cacao. So, you know, that sort of shamanic drink. And I just thought that was really cool. Very interesting.
Well, and you also, and cacao takes like forever to prepare, forever. Yeah. You know, and so that's that only certain people can do this, not because it's like an exclusive club, but because it takes so much skill and time. You have to want to do it. You have to want to prepare cacao, you know, in the traditional manner. I really like this. This is the goddess Cybele, and I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but this gets to a different interpretation of the Hierophant, because the story behind her was that basically in Rome they you know, an oracle said that Cybele wanted to be welcomed to the city. So what they did was they went to Turkey. She's a Turkish goddess originally, so they went and they got a black stone that was sacred to her, and they paraded it through the city, and they brought it to the temple and installed it. And what happened was, like, they had the best harvest, you know, in years. And a year later, they defeated Hannibal, and that defeat was attributed to her. And so the idea is that the Hierophant is the Hierophant is about spiritual advancement, spiritual growth in community, right? Spiritual growth in community. The Hierophant ultimately represents the spiritual community, right? And I really like that because it does away with the whole top down idea. And this is the card that Denise had on the had on the
On
on the
our
banner.
event invite, yes, I think my challenge is to try to find Creative Commons images if I can.
So this is Chiron, and he is actually the son of a he's the son of a god, and in his I forget which god it was. It's like it was a minor god who Zeus created an image of a cloud, turned a cloud into an image of his wife so that the god would not have sex with Zeus's wife. I mean, and so basically Chiron was produced, and he is half god, half horse. So he's got the divine and the earthly, you know, and he was educated by he was educated by the gods, and because of that, he was then tasked with educating all the major heroes. You know, it's like if the gods had an offspring with a human, it's like, okay, it was understood that that offspring was then going to go study with Chiron. So it was, you know, Hercules and so on, and, you know, like the major heroes. But what's interesting about Chiron is in the story that the deck that the book, the text that goes along with the deck talks about, is that after Hercules kills the Hydra, he comes in and he goes to see Chiron, I guess to like brag to his teacher that he did that, you know. And what happens is he accidentally brushes up against Chiron with an arrow or with a knife or something that had the Hydra's blood on it.
Oh.
And so Chiron and Chiron's immortal, so he can't die, but he has a wound that won't heal. So he's in excruciating pain constantly. And yet he's still dedicated to share this knowledge. So with Chiron, we get the joy and the pain involved with teaching, involved with sharing knowledge.
I laugh as a previous teacher.
Yeah.
Right. And so I really thought that was an interesting take on the Hierophant. That there can be pain involved.
That there's a burden.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And this is Wildwood, and this brings home the idea of tradition over dogma, because it's ancestor.
Yeah.
You know, and apparently this figure is female, according to the
It looks like it.
writers of the deck. So she is honoring and summoning up her ancestors. So we're getting less and less traditional as we move on. Here in this,
wow,
this Hierophant is actually a tree.
In both of these.
Yeah. And I'm not familiar at all with this deck. This was just a card I found. But they're very similar.
Yeah, they are.
They're very similar. In fact, when I just glanced, I thought that was Shadowscapes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's the same author. I mean, same artist.
Yeah.
It very well could be.
Wow, these feel like the word esoterical.
And this is the Paulina deck. I don't know anything about it. I just picked up this card because it's so similar to Shadowscape.
Well, look at the book of knowledge or a book of knowledge there at the base,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then all of, all of those little characters or figures that have come to learn.
and it's a
And you've even got the half God and half animal.
yeah, you
there.
do. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Wow.
And this is the same, essentially the same thing, except he's in like a half lotus position.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kurt, for putting all this together for us.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. It motivates me to actually like learn something.
I love it.
And then I like, this is like the card Denise showed us. This is the Hierophant as shaman,
Mhm.
and I believe that's a hawk. It's either a hawk or an eagle. This might be an eagle. Actually,
It
but
looks like an eagle.
divine wisdom and spiritual power.
Eagle.
Yeah.
And what deck is that again?
That's the oh my god.
It's okay, never mind, but we can move on.
I'll remember it in a moment. So, and then this is a deck. I mean, this is a card from Vision Quest Tarot, the Shaman, right? The one who can cause others to see visions, right? Now, I love this concept because
Mhm.
this illustrates, Rachel Pollack here is illustrating the Hierophant as the holder of sacred space. And so the way she talks about it, the green, once they enter the circle, they're touched by the divine. And
Mm.
she talks about the stones actually being inhabited by the great powers, the spirits, right? And we've seen a lot of salmon here in her
Mhm.
work and in this deck, but I like this idea of the Hierophant being the holder of the sacred space.
I
It
love that.
it reminds me of, like in a witch's circle, when the person who is leading the circle, or who is opening the circle, says, in perfect love and perfect trust, and you get smudged and everything, and you get led into the circle, so so they become the holder of the sacred space. And it's also the idea that I very much believe in, that the creation of sacred space is a communal act. It's a sometimes unintentional, but can also be an intentional communal act.
Mhm.
And here we've got the three, like we've seen the three before, but this almost looks like a uterus,
Yeah.
like, you know
Oh, like fallopian.
yeah, like fallopian tubes. And
Fallopian tubes, and I was like, but well, okay.
um now I love this deck just blows me away. This is the Chrysalis. And
Mm.
it just each card we look at from this deck kind of blows me away. Like, there's so many different ways to look at this. You've got the shell, which is reminiscent of Aphrodite or Aphrodite. Like, you've got the light here, butterflies, which of course that's the theme of Chrysalis. But the reading, the interpretation with this is awakening the divine child through self-acceptance. That's kind of a departure from the idea of from the traditional idea of the Hierophant, but I love it. I think it's fantastic. And rather than a book, he's got like an artist palette.
I love that.
Which yeah, I really like that.
And then look at the stuff as the headband. You've got the moon, the sun, the flowers, the feathers, the leaves. It's just, this is magical, you guys.
Card.
Yeah, the message is that we all have this divine child within us, right? And it's a matter of basically reading nature, and was what he's doing is like reading and awakening that, accepting who we are to awaken that child. within us. I love the butterflies. Like this is just cool, you know.
Now, have you put cards from this deck in our previous lessons?
Yes, yes. And every lesson we've had, I think, has had a card from this deck.
Okay, well, none of them impacted my brain like this one.
This is a beautiful card.
This is a beautiful card.
Yeah.
So there's
Oh,
that
look, it's a
sense
frog.
of, yes, I saw that. There's this sense of joy, that wonder, that wonderment of a child that just is so liberating, that allows them to go create absolutely anything with infinite possibility.
And because that child is unfettered, right? That child is a Hierophant.
Mm-hmm.
Because the child's basically in the know, right? That's what the Hierophant's about, is like being in the know, you know. Unlike the fool, who doesn't have a clue. The fool might be unfettered, but the fool is a fool. Like the fool is like, I'm just who I am.
Okay.
Hierophant is kind of like this child, like you can see, like he's very, he or she is very, very intent on that color palette, right? Yeah. The child is about to create. The child is like, you know, like.
But from this space of, that card.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
You're gonna have to put less cards in your presentation so that we don't all keep spending money.
No,
Hey.
I've stopped myself on it. I've stopped myself a couple of times from buying this deck. Like it's $27 on Amazon.
That's with the book. If you get just the card deck, if you just get the deck, 15.
Yeah, but see, the price difference is not enough to not get the
Right.
All right, so this is the even less traditional, right? This is so here, and I like this, right? This is something, being in San Antonio, we can relate to. She's going into the herb shop, and she's chatting. Like when I worked in the import shop that also had an herb shop in the back, we of course I did tarot. We had an herb shop in the back. We had drums. We had deity statues. But it was a center. It was like a community hub, right, where people would just come in and
hang out.
And so she's hanging out with her buddy, who also is like giving her advice on herbs for whatever ritual she's doing, you know. And she's got her book of shadows. And oh yeah, so she's actually shown, here's my shopping list.
Here's my list.
Yeah.
This is so below, right?
This is so below, right?
Okay.
Now, I don't necessarily vibe with. I mean, I get what she's doing with having the Hierophant as the book of shadows. Because she's saying that in Wicca particularly, which isn't always necessarily true, but in American, I would say, like in general eclectic American Wicca, there are no authorities. They just that the individual, you know, essentially educates oneself, and this is the book of shadows that is sort of the repository for that knowledge. I would have rather have seen, like, you know, a witch queen or something to that effect, but I do get what this is her way of debunking the whole patriarchal you know, tradition of the Hierophant, right?
Yeah, and it's like a book of knowledge.
Yeah, and what it reminds me of is so Sikhism, right? In Sikhism, they had gurus for like a couple centuries, but then finally the book is the guru, right? There's not going to be any more earthly gurus. The book is going to be the guru. Yeah. And so still to this day, you go to Sikh temples, they have the book.
Are you saying seek, like seek and ye shall find?
Sikh as in the religion of Sikhism.
But is it spelled S-E-E-K?
No, it is not. It is not.
What is it? S-I-K-H?
Okay, I was just trying to grab my brain around that.
Yeah, I believe so.
Let me see.
It's okay, Denise.
Yeah,
But
SIKH.
it's a fascinating faith system. It was an attempt to combine Islam and Sanatana Dharma and Buddhism like all together, so as to essentially create like a peaceful harmony. It ended up there's like historically some weird stuff happened, and they ended up militarizing. So it's just like, but you will note Sikhs by their turbans. Sikhs don't cut their hair ever, and so you'll note Sikhs by their turbans, male Sikhs by their turbans.
Was this they militarized in northern India?
Yeah, and they still wear the ceremonial knife. What they don't take off though is they wear a chain like a chain link around their wrist, which symbolizes being a chained servant to the divine. And they don't.
Oh, I don't like that.
And they don't cut their hair.
I don't like that chained servant to the divine.
Well, the very traditional. Well, but see, we have a very because of our history in the West, especially, and because of America and Europe, we have a very negative, extremely negative connotation to the idea of slave or servitude. But in the East, the idea is if you are a slave to somebody, that person takes complete and utter responsibility for your care, and that person sustains you, and that person loves you, and so on. It's a different connotation than what we have. You know.
Oh, okay.
It's a very different connotation than what we have. The idea, for example, like if you have devotion, if you are a slave to God, to the divine, then it's more like a romance. It's more like,
ooh, okay.
Yeah, that's what it's, the other, or you're like God's best friend, or you're God's child, or God's your child, which, something like that. But it's not the context that we in the West have. We have that context for very good reason historically. But so this is what Osho does with it. Osho just make a blank, no thingness. And the idea here is, of course, that in nothing you also have everything, right? It's a very William Burroughs, postmodern idea that if nothing means anything, then nothing also means everything. Well,
and I was kind of looking at it too as like, I don't know how else to say this and articulate it, but to be like the Heirophant, or to ascend to that level of wisdom, you have to actually detach from all things material. So when you can get to that place, and I see that place as in my meditation, because I see this 5D space that looks like that, except you can actually see into it when I meditate. And so that's how I see that. And it's in those gaps of our meditation time that we can commune and receive bits of that wisdom.
I think that Osho would agree with you. Yeah. And he wouldn't even make you drink the hallucinogenic beer.
Well, the funny thing is, Kurt, you know me, I wouldn't have to.
But yeah, and I believe.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'm loving that Book of Shadows, those decks, Kurt.
They're really cool. They are really cool. And like I said, the box set is $30. If you were to buy them individually, they're like
You're
17.
absolutely killing me.
Hey, I tried to give you a deck the other night. You wouldn't. So don't even talk to me.
Oh, and I'm supposed to be practicing receiving.
I was going
And
to give you that deck because you were feeling some kind of way, and you love that deck. And I was like, I've got so many decks.
I'm in
You were
love
like,
with it.
you were like,
Okay.
I can't take the, yeah.
Well, I will practice receiving next time.
Okay. Because I got tons of decks, and I can only play. There's only so much deck playing with time, and allotted.
Denise, did you see my new deck, the Cyberpunk deck? Did you see the Emperor?
I saw that earlier today. That's really fun.
Okay, so I got that used out of one of these tarot groups where the girl wasn't like overcharging. And I am in love with that deck.
And that's an expensive deck if you buy it new.
Oh, and I promise you, I didn't pay her much for it. Like, this girl was being kind, and she allowed me to negotiate a little also.
Because it's one of those, it's not the most expensive deck, but it's like just for the cards, it's like 40 something. Like if
yeah, and it's had multiple printings. These are like actually from the artist.
Wow.
Wow.
I think this is like, it's not numbered or anything, but I think this is like the second printing that I got. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it's the artist sells on Etsy directly from the artist, etc.
Yes, exactly.
And they're constantly sold out. Like, you can't even find it new.
So I saw a deck today. It's I'm really liking Oracle decks, like, and because they're very personal, and they're very very centered on what they're about, right? So there's a deck, and it's only $17. Okay, but check out what it is though. It's photographs of 60 hieroglyphs.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's cool. Wow.
Yes.
Like actual, for real.
Actual hieroglyphs.
Oh wow.
And the book, you have to buy the book separately, but it's on Kindle, which is a bonus for me. The book that explains the hieroglyphs is 300 pages.
Oh.
Like, so it's like one of the interpretations is on the Amazon page, and it's the interpretation for the Ankh, or the discussion of the Ankh. That is like freaking long. There's like, there's like 10 different potential meanings for the Ankh, for just,
Wow.
And yeah, so I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about it. I've been real, because when CJ and I actually like looked at how many decks I have, I'm like,
And ever since we started this group, he's been ordering decks like every week.
Oh no! How many do you have?
Like 17.
Okay.
Oh, see, Angel likes it. See, I got a heart for that. I got a heart for that. See, thank you.
Angel, I didn't even, you were, hi. I'll give you a heart for that too, because because it's absolutely, I probably order a deck every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
I'm not full-blown collector, but I have several decks. I'll put it.
I now have a space for my decks, and I
Okay.
have like an area that I can do readings, and that I can also double as like an altar if we just like. So next week is Imbolc. Here, I'm going to stop the recording.
Hi, Angel.
Go ahead and stop sharing too, so we can.
Oh yeah, stop share. I forget that I can't.
So we can see each other.
Okay, where?
I had to sit
the record
down.
button. Okay, here's the record button up here. So there we go. We're gonna end. Bye, everybody.
Bye.